Anatomy and Physiology of the Heart. This is a 4-part series. This video is part 1 in the series. For the other videos, see Prescribon Medical Education Series, Anatomy and Physiology of the Heart. In this picture, the picture of the heart, you see the structure of the heart. The greenish color is for the venous blood, which is less oxygenated. The reddish color for the well oxygenated. From the great veins, the venous blood drains into the right atrium, then to the right ventricle, and through the pulmonary artery to lungs. Back from lungs, through pulmonary veins, into left atrium, then to left ventricle, and through aorta to all over the body. Now, let us see the circulation of blood in a little more detail. The heart is a highly specialized muscular organ composed of 2 to 3 billion cardiomyocytes. These are the special heart muscle cells. It is constantly at work from birth to death, beating about 100,000 times per day. That is 2.5 billion times in a 70-year lifespan. It is designed to pump blood to the whole body. The human heart is a remarkably efficient, durable, and reliable pump, propelling more than 7,500 liters of blood through the body each day and beating more than 40 million times a year. The heart is the wellspring for tissue oxygenation, nutrition, and waste removal. In utero, that is when the patient is pregnant in his mother's body, the heart and vasculature are the first fully functional organ system at roughly 8 weeks of gestation. Without a vascular supply and a beating heart, further development of the fetus cannot occur and fetal demise is inevitable. When the heart fails postnatally, the results are equally catastrophic. Cardiovascular disease, including coronary artery disease, that is CAD, stroke, and peripheral vascular disease, together are the number one cause of worldwide mortality. In the United States alone, cardiovascular disease accounts for roughly 1 in 4 of all deaths, totaling about 610,000 individuals each year, greater than the number of deaths caused by all forms of cancer combined. Heart weight varies with body habitus, averaging approximately 0.4% to 0.5% of total body weight. 250 to 320 gram in the average adult female and 300 to 360 gram in the average adult male. Dear listeners, by the way, this educational video is made possible by Prescribon, the makers of e-prescription software for digital prescriptions available freely for doctors on the website www.prescribon.com. Doctors who are interested in this e-prescription can freely avail of its vast collection of more than 100,000 e-prescriptions. Trade-off between specialization of heart muscle and the ability of the heart to divide and renew itself. The downside of this sophisticated specialization of the heart muscle is that it has lost most of its multiplication function soon after birth. It is just like the nervous system, which has lost similar capacity. Later we shall see how important this is whenever injury to the heart occurs. The heart has two separate pumps. We have earlier seen in the figure of the heart. Actually, the heart works as two separate pumps. A right heart that pumps blood from the heart through the lungs, and a left heart that pumps blood from the heart through the systemic circulation that provides blood flow to the other organs and tissues of the body. Each of these pumps is a pulsatile two-chamber pump composed of an atrium and a ventricle. Each atrium is a weak pump for the ventricle, helping to move blood into the ventricle. The ventricles then supply the main pumping force that propels the blood either through the pulmonary circulation by the right ventricle or through the systemic circulation by the left ventricle. The heart is surrounded by a two-layer sac called the pericardium, which protects the heart and holds it in place. Special mechanisms in the heart causes a continuing succession of contractions called cardiac rhythmicity, transmitting electrical pulses throughout the cardiac muscle to cause the heart's rhythmical beat. Recall the earlier picture of the structure of the heart. In this picture, the green color is for the venous blood, which is less oxygenated, looking more bluish. The reddish color is for the well oxygenated arterial blood. The arrows, the directions of the arrows, show the direction of the flow of blood. From the great veins, the venous blood drains into the right atrium, then to the right ventricle, and through the pulmonary artery to lungs. Back from the lungs after oxygenation, through the pulmonary veins into left atrium, then to the left ventricle, and through the aorta to all over the body. Now, let us see the circulation of blood in a little more detail. Direction of blood flow. Venous blood looking less reddish, oxygen low, that is containing about 15 ml per 100 ml, carbon dioxide rich, that is 52 ml per 100 ml, nutrient poor, and carrying waste products from all over the body are transported by the superior vena cava, that is from the upper parts of the body, and inferior vena cava from the lower parts of the body, and both drain into the heart, first to a chamber known as right atrium. The blood passes through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle, from where it is pumped across the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary artery to both lungs. The direction of flow is right atrium to tricuspid valve, right ventricle, pulmonary valve, pulmonary artery, and lungs. In the lungs, exchange of gases, oxygen absorbed into the red blood cells, carbon dioxide comes out of the blood and mixes with the air in lungs, they take place. When the blood coming out of lungs looking more reddish, well oxygenated, about 20 ml per 100 ml, carbon dioxide poor, about 48 ml per 100 ml, is transported by the pulmonary veins to the left atrium of the heart. The blood passes through the mitral valve to the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, the blood is pumped through the aortic valve into aorta and its branches to all over the body. Direction of flow, lungs to pulmonary veins, to left atrium, through mitral valve and left ventricle and aorta. Systemic circulation from the heart to tissues through arteries, and from tissues through veins back to heart is called systemic circulation. From the heart to lungs through pulmonary artery, and back from the lungs to heart through pulmonary veins is called pulmonary circulation. The function of the heart. The function of the heart is to pump sufficient oxygenated blood containing nutrients, metabolites, and hormones to meet moment-to-moment metabolic needs and preserve a constant internal environment. The heart has two essential characteristics: contractility, that is shortening the length of its muscle fibers, and rhythmicity, that is contraction at regular intervals. The nervous system and neurohumoral agents modulate relationships between the venous return to the heart, the outflow resistance against which it contracts, the frequency of contraction, and its inotropic, that is contractile state. There are also intrinsic cardiac autoregulatory mechanisms. An understanding of the molecular mechanisms governing cardiac cell behavior and the mechanical, electrical, and hormonal control of the heart at a whole organ level is essential for the understanding of cardiac function. Muscle activity and electrical impulse conduction through cardiac muscle. The heart is composed of three major types of cardiac muscle: atrial muscle, ventricular muscle, and specialized excitatory and conductive muscle fibers. The atrial and ventricular types of muscle contract in much the same way as skeletal muscle, except that the duration of contraction is much longer. The specialized excitatory and conductive fibers of the heart, however, contract feebly because they contain few contractile fibrils. Instead, they exhibit automatic rhythmical electrical discharge in the form of action potentials or conduction of the action potentials through the heart, providing an excitatory system that controls the rhythmical beating of the heart. Muscle types. In the body, there are three types of muscle: skeletal, striated; cardiac, that is also striated; and smooth muscles, non striated. Skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle attached to bones is responsible for skeletal movements. The peripheral portion of the central nervous system, CNS, controls the skeletal muscles. Thus, these muscles are under conscious or voluntary control. The basic unit is the muscle fiber with many nuclei. These muscle fibers are striated, that is, having transverse streaks, and each acts independently of neighboring muscle fibers. Cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle, found in the walls of the heart, is under control of the autonomic nervous system. The cardiac muscle cells has one central nucleus, like smooth muscle, but it also is striated like skeletal muscle. The cardiac muscle has typical myofibrils that contain actin and myosin filaments, almost identical to those found in skeletal muscle. These filaments lie side by side and slide during contraction in the same manner as occurs in skeletal muscle. However, cardiac muscle is quite different from skeletal muscle. See later. The cardiac muscle cell is rectangular in shape. The contraction of cardiac muscle is involuntary, strong, and rhythmical. Smooth muscle. Smooth muscle, found in the walls of the hollow internal organs such as blood vessels, the gastrointestinal tract, bladder, and uterus, is under the control of the autonomic nervous system. Smooth muscle cannot be controlled consciously and thus acts involuntarily. The non-striated smooth muscle cell is spindle shaped and has one central nucleus. Smooth muscle contracts slowly and rhythmically. Differences between cardiac and skeletal muscle. The cardiac muscle has a length of 100 into 25 micrometers. 1 micrometer is 1,000th of a millimeter. It's controlled by autonomic nervous system, semi-spindle shaped, with gap junctions present, and uninucleated. The skeletal muscle is a bigger cell, 25,000 into 100 micrometers, controlled by somatic nervous system, cylindrical in shape with no gap junctions and is multinucleated. These figures show cardiomyocytes, that is, the unit muscle of the heart, which are connected to each other by intercalated discs. They have a central nucleus and plenty of energy supplying mitochondria. They have a rich capillary blood vessel network. This figure shows a cut section of the heart. Innermost lining is the endocardium, covering a thick layer of myocardium having myocardial cells, lined on the outside by epicardium, pericardial space, parietal pericardium, and fibrous pericardium in that order. Left ventricular rotation, that is twist, aids left ventricular ejection of blood and relaxation. The left ventricle is organized into complex muscle fiber layers that run in different directions, almost like a three-dimensional figure of eight, and allow the heart to contract in a three-dimensional twisting motion during systole, that is contraction. The subepicardial outer layer spirals in a leftward direction, and the subendocardial, that is the inner layer, spirals in the opposite direction, that is rightward, causing clockwise rotation of the apex of the heart and counterclockwise rotation of the base of the left ventricle. This arrangement causes a ringing motion, like wringing a piece of wet cloth of the left ventricle, pulling the base downward toward the apex during systole. At the end of systole, that is contraction phase, the left ventricle is similar to a loaded spring and recoils or untwists during diastole, that is relaxation, to allow blood to enter the pumping chambers rapidly. Cardiac muscle is a syncytium of cardiac myocytes, that is muscle cells. Cardiac myocytes, that is cardiomyocytes, are the contractile cells of the heart and include ventricular and atrial myocytes, as well as cells specialized to provide the electrical impulse and conduction system. Myocytes constitute the bulk of the cellular volume, but because they are large cells, they are fewer in number. This so-called few number is relative. As we already noted, this number is 2 to 3 billion. The cardiomyocytes are by far outnumbered by endothelial cells, smooth muscle cells of the vasculature, that is vessel network, and fibroblasts, cells which produce the fibers, collagen and elastin. Replication of ventricular myocytes is believed to decrease rapidly after birth and occurs at an extremely low rate in adult. Most adult cardiac cells, at least the ventricular myocytes, are terminally differentiated, that is, they no longer divide. This fact is highly important in terms of heart attack, that is myocardial infarction, MI, followed by repair of the damaged myocardial muscle. But this is less clear for the atrial myocyte, that is the repairing ability. Terminal differentiation of the cardiac myocytes has important consequences for the heart. 1. The cardiac muscle is limited in its ability to survive hemodynamic insults or stresses, that is, limited repair mechanisms. 2. Because the division rate is poor, the myocardium is essentially resistant to malignant transformation, that is, decreased possibility of chromosomal division error during cell multiplication, that is, cancer incidence of the heart is very much less. Note, only about 1% of the heart muscle cells are replaced every year at age 25, and that rate gradually falls to less than 0.5% per year by age 75. Generally, at no time is the healthy or diseased human heart able to replace damaged tissue efficiently. Even though cardiac cells are unable to proliferate, they can perform their physiological functions, undergo cellular hypertrophy, that is increase in cell size, and ultimately die by apoptosis, that is programmed cell death, or necrosis, that is death. Dear listeners, this is the end of part 1 in this 4-part series. For the other videos in this series, see Prescribon Medical Education series, Anatomy and Physiology of Heart.